Our text study this morning, just a quick word, which is that I have not been able to get the Tim McGraw song out of my head since starting this. Y'all know the song I'm talking about? Always Be Humble and Kind, right? Although he didn't actually write the song, I think he sort of made it popular. I wanted to teach these texts this week not only because they appear in the Talmud, and if you have not gotten a copy of the texts, raise your hand and we'll sort of make our way around and make sure everybody gets a copy. I think I have a big stack somewhere, leftovers. I should have about 50 copies. Handouts going around, good. And if you're watching from home, by the way, you can go to sefaria.org and you can go to Sukkah 49b, type it in, and that's the page in the Talmud we are looking at. But in any case, I wanted to teach this series of texts this Shabbat because I think that they really do have quite an important value when it comes to the high holidays. Someday I want to give a sermon on the high holidays about that song, Always Be Humble and Kind. Especially the line that says, you know, go to church when your daddy said so, right? We'll just change it to shul, it'll be all good, you know. But the idea of course, of these texts being themes that are important themes for us to reflect on as we approach the high holidays, I can't imagine are coincidental. And so I want to return to the question that I began by asking this morning, a little bit earlier, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. You've had some time to think about it, and that is it the case that humble people are kind, or that kind people are humble? I'm sorry, humble and charitable, I'm reversing that. Charity and kindness, right? Is it the case that kind people are charitable, or charitable people are kind? If you want to raise their hand up, Bob, I saw your hand, raise your hand.
I thought there's a bunch of kind people who do lots of good stuff for the community, for various charitable organizations, but they still might be full of themselves.
Okay.
And I think on the other hand, I can't see humble people not being kind.
Being charitable. Sorry, I put kindness in there, I confused you, but it's really about charity. Yes, charity and kindness. That's okay. Other thoughts? It's all good. Other thoughts? Charitable versus kindness? Silence. Wow. Go ahead, Lauren. Jump in.
A lot of people can be charitable because they have a lot of money and they feel that either it looks good or it's a tax write-off, but that doesn't mean that they're kind to other people.
Okay. Maybe. Let's keep going. Other thoughts? Yeah, Berna? Kinds and have the means to be charitable. Okay. Other thoughts? People are nodding in agreement. Yeah, Allison.
So I think anybody of any means can be charitable, because even a smile can be charity. But you don't have to be kind because it can be an obligation to you.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll talk about Maimonides a little bit later, right? Who kind of solves this question for us a little bit. Yeah, Miriam. Okay. So let's take humility out of the equation because I confused everybody. It begins with always be humble and kind, but I'm really looking for is kindness versus charity. Is it kind people who are charitable, or is it charitable people who are kind? Yeah, Judith.
I don't think you can necessarily associate one characteristic with another.
Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah. Two more final comments. Ronnie? Yeah.
It's easy to be kind people. It's harder to reach your pocket and say, I want to make a commitment financially.
Yeah.
Argue that kindness is also charity. And those that volunteer, maybe they give up their time, but they decide that they don't want to give up their money.
Okay. By the way, the reason, thank you, Ronnie, that we're getting such varied opinions is as many as the Talmud is because this is not an easy subject to try to discern. Yeah, Audrey, and then we'll take two more comments. Okay, good. Yeah.
Are you being charitable in whatever means you choose to be charitable because someone said because it looks good? What is the optics associated Are you kind or because you want to be, because it comes from within, as Robert spoke about earlier? Or is it, again, because you're suddenly put on the spot and you have no choice but to engage in that act? So I think intent is very important when you discuss higher level.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I think that kindness is something that is innate. We are taught or we observe at an early age and become kind. I don't think, charity just means money. As she had just said, volunteering is charitable.
Mm.
And so I think that, I did study when you said that earlier.
I'm glad.
I studied the wrong word. I wasn't ready for this.
That's okay.
But I do think that being kind has a lot more meat on the bone, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
than charitable is, do you choose to be charitable with volunteering, with money, with whatever it is that you can give?
I'm going to take two more I've got everybody's hands. All right, I'll try to get the last 4 comments. This is it. And then we're going to, we'll delve into the texts a little bit. Yeah, Steve. Go.
I think being kind might, at some level, imply some charitableness. Because when I'm kind, I'm doing that to another person on behalf of that person. And there's an inherent charitableness that comes with that, and I think that kindness might have some purpose.
Okay, yeah, Steve.
I think that there are some people who have an innate personality that makes them gruff or seem to be troubled, yet when they give charity, that is their way of giving kindness, to be able to establish that kindness is also part of them.
Yeah. So last 3 comments. God. I'm breaking my word. God, yeah. Bob.
Unfortunately, I think in the world of fundraising, charity is something that we motivate people to do by appealing to their egos, if you will. When you see
Sometimes, yeah.
in publications tiers and levels that people give, and I think that very often they give, yes, because they want to, but they also like to see their name in print at a certain level, and I'm not sure that kindness is at all relevant.
Okay. I'll only share with you a funny story that Cheryl knows because she was sitting at the table with me when we were talking about it. I'm going to save the story itself for a better time, but I was sitting at the table with someone whose grandfather had been very charitable and named for the college that I went to. And the person said, he did it for the tax write-off. He goes, my grandmother was a good soul. She did it for all the right reasons. Him, it was about the taxes. And it was, everybody's got their different motivations. Karen, yeah.
In going with what, I don't know who said that some kindness is innate, I think if we're lucky to be born into a family with kind people that came before us, and they pass that down as some things are part of your neshama. They're just what you're born with. And things are nurtured by the parents, grandparents, whoever it is. But I think that the innate part of us to be kind, kindness kind of takes in a lot of things, but I do believe that innate good neshama kindness leads one to think that the right thing to do is to give tzedakah, is to be charitable.
Okay, we're going to get there in a minute. Good, yeah, I think we're almost there. Noah, yeah.
The value of charity and kindness is your ability to transmit it to others, so that others then do acts of charity.
We're going to get there too. I think that's good. Any more comments? Last, hold your peace. Sorry, Miriam, go ahead.
I think there's an interesting distinction made that tzedakah is a commandment. And it's like you don't have a choice. You gotta give, how you give, how much you give, that's a different story, but it's a commandment, whereas chesed, or kindness, is the going above and beyond in whatever direction you take that. And that's what I love in Judaism, is that we are commanded to help our fellow
Thank you, Miriam. I'm done for today. That was great. First of all, I want to thank Miriam because she's, of course, using the words that the Talmud is using, right? Which is the word chesed for kindness and tzedakah for charity. Whether tzedakah means charity is a whole nother conversation. I don't think it does, but for the sake of this text, the Noe edition of the Talmud, which was put out by Rabbi Steinsaltz, there's our connecting text today. We do have this notion, and what I'd like to do is just review these texts going to the holidays, food for thought with you today. We do have this notion that charity, yes, is a mitzvah, and it's something important, but that kindness is really the underpinning that makes the charity worthwhile. In other words, charity is important, but at the end of the day, it is kindness ultimately that the Torah feels will lead you to do charity, and not the other way around. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, right? I think there are probably cases of people who, give tzedakah and then afterwards realize the impact of what they've done and realize how amazing it is, and perhaps it makes them kinder. But there is this notion that, as we're going to see as these texts go along, that kindness is really the foundation, right, that leads folks, that sweetens the deal when it comes to charity. In other words, if you give tzedakah, it's wonderful. Everyone should give tzedakah. But if you do it in a way that it is kind or excessively kind, then the power of that charity that you've done is magnified by multitudes. And so the first text, if you just look at, is kind of an introduction. Text 1, I said, always be humble and kind. But really, if you look here, and again, this is from Masechet Sukkah of the Talmud, Rabbi Elazar says, brings this very famous quote from the book of Micah. We read it in Haftorah. Hagid lacha adam matov, God will teach you what is good and what God expects from you. Do mishpat, do justice, and ahavat chesed, and love kindness, and walk modestly before God. And he goes on to say that mishpat, right, justice, or rather is justice, but chesed is kindness, and that these are all matters that are very important, and then goes on to talk about humility. You see that little S over here toward the bottom in the English? It looks kind of like a little decorative S there. That S is the English word, or the Hebrew word for sugya, and what's really great about these little S's in this particular version of the text is it means, and now we're going to change the topic. So that's very helpful to know when you're studying Talmud. The S there for sugya means the topic is changing. But by apropos of the previous conversation, we then delve into the conversation that I had mentioned earlier. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Gadol ha'oset tzedakah mikol ha'korbanot. Rabbi Elazar says, if you do tzedakah, it's better than all of the sacrifices combined. And we know, of course, that by doing tzedakah is seen by our rabbis as a replacement for the sacrifices in the temple. But then he goes on to say, V'amar Rabbi Elazar, Gadol gemilut chasadim min hatzdakah. Doing kindness is greater than tzedakah. Why? Because he has this great quote from the prophet Hosea, who says that you sow in justice or in charity, but you ultimately reap what you sow in kindness. Okay, so you may plant the seeds with tzedakah, but ultimately it's kindness that you get to, with which you get to eat, with which you feed yourself. And I think there's something to be said for that. If you give money somewhere, tzedakah, because you have an ego about it, then perhaps you've missed the point of the tzedakah, although you've certainly given it, and that's a wonderful thing. But if you delve into that tzedakah, and you do it in a kind way, and it changes you, then there was tremendous value in it. That's a really powerful lesson. And we look at 2b at the top of the next page, and that kind of emphasizes that even more. Rabbi Elazar then follows up, Ein hatzdaka mish talemet ela lefi chesed sheba, which literally means that tzedakah doesn't become complete unless it has kindness within it. In other words, if the most, as it says here, the charity is paid in accordance with the kindness and generosity that's done there, and then it's that same quote, that you sow according to charity and you reap according to love and kindness. The sages then go on to continue to teach, And if you ever come to weekday minyan and you do Torah study at the very beginning of the service, which means you would have to be there at 7 o'clock. So Noah, I think that's pretty much you in the room, and maybe Barry also, and some others who are here. Did I miss anybody? No, I think we're good. In any case, so if you're here very early in the morning, Michael also, then this is one of the texts that we can choose from in the morning. Tanu Rabbana bishlosha dvarim gedola gemilut chasadim yoter min tzedakah. Let's talk about how gemilut chesed, kindness, is greater than tzedakah. And again, we could spend hours talking about these texts, and if you'd like to, let's talk about them over lunch. Tzedakah b'mamono, tzedakah is done with money, but kindness doesn't necessarily have to be done with money. Who said that earlier? You don't have to have money necessarily to be kind, you just have to be kind. Tzedakah is done for poor people, specifically, aniyim, but gemilut chesed, kindness, can be done both for those who are poor and those who are rich. Right? And in other words, you can be kind to anybody. It doesn't matter in that regard. Tzedakah is done for those who are alive, but chesed, acts of kindness, are done for both the living and the dead. By the way, by apropos of that, what is the greatest, kindest act you can do for somebody who is dead? As Jews, bury them, right? We consider burial to be what we call a chesed shel emet, a chesed, a kindness of the truest form, because when you bury somebody, they cannot repay that mitzvah. It is something that you have done for them that they cannot redo for you. Good. And then if you keep going here, you see my little arrows, my little annotations here. I didn't become a rabbi for my handwriting, needless to say. But text 4 there, about how charity and justice are really the underpinnings of kindness. So if you look at that text, again, Rabbi Elazar goes on to continue. Kol ha'oseh tzedakah u'mishpat. If you do tzedakah and justice, ki'ilu milei kol ha'am ulam kulo chesed. If you do all of those things, that is, if you fill the world with kindness. Something very important, which takes us to our last text, and this is one of my favorite teachings from the old Sim Shalom, and this has to do with what makes a Torah a kind Torah. If you look at this beautiful quote here, we see toward the bottom, right? V'amar Rabbi Elazar, my dichtiv, why does it say and actually this is from the book of Proverbs known as Eshet Chayil, Pietcha potcha bechochma v'torat chesed al lashona, that she opens her mouth with wisdom and her Torah of loving kindness on her tongue. So the rabbis ask, what? Is there a Torah that's not loving in some way? How can a Torah be loving versus not loving? And this ties into what Karen, I think, alluded to a little bit earlier, right? Or it was Noah who said this, right? If you teach Torah to others, that is when the Torah is kind. Or if you teach Torah for its own sake, then it becomes a Torah that is kind. In other words, there is a good Torah, and it's not a kind Torah and an unkind Torah. But if you study Torah for, let's say, some ulterior motive, right? Just like, let's say, you give tzedakah for some ulterior motive. Yes, it's still a mitzvah. It's a wonderful thing. But if there is kindness at its underpinning, then you have done the world a justice and a service, and you've done a service to yourself. And I think there could be no greater lesson as we enter our high holy days this particular year. The way that society is going to continue to thrive, folks, the way that our world is going to continue to thrive is not only through generosity, but the kindness that is imbued in that generosity. I think of so many stories, right? So many acts of kindness. Look at New Orleans, what's happening right now. There's generosity, but there's so much kindness imbued in that generosity that makes it happen. Just this past week, by the way, I got a text message from a colleague in Washington who said, we're thinking about our friends in Georgia right now. Do you need anything? Can we do anything for you? I guess he was misinformed that we had been trenched by the hurricane. And I said, actually, I've been thinking about you up in Washington. Are you okay from the hurricane? If you've seen the images of the Vine Street Expressway in Philadelphia, where I'm from, oy vavoy, hopefully Carly's okay, right? Not far from Penn. I took that road all the time, right? Lots of flooding and different things happening. Well, generosity and tzedakah is how we're going to fix that. But ultimately, if that generosity misses the point of the kindness, yes, it's still generosity, but it doesn't have the same weight. It doesn't carry the same value. And so I hope that as we go into the new year together, we will be generous, and we will continue to be generous, but that generosity will also be imbued in that spirit of kindness that takes us from one place to the other in these challenging times. Shabbat Shalom. And thank you all for